This episode proves why you cannot judge a book by its cover, why you cannot judge an episode based on its preview and the title alone. By all accounts, episode 92 here was shaping up to be quite unspectacular and, more importantly, quite unimportant to the story. At first glance, it seemed like it wouldn't add anything meaningful or significant to the narrative or the characters, hence why I didn't even make a preview discussion on it. But boy, was I wrong. My initial assessment couldn't be farther from the truth. Well, actually, that's a bit of an exaggeration. I wasn't that far off because for the most part, this episode is exactly what I expected it to be. Liko and Roy go on the hunt for another Laquium-afflicted Pokémon, who this time turns out to be a Steelix, who predictably they cannot stop or reason with without battling it since it's gone berserk. And so, much like with Slacking 2 episodes ago, we get what is basically a raid battle with multiple Pokémon engaging the rampaging Pokémon together, only to find that even with an overwhelming advantage in terms of numbers, and even with a type advantage, this time courtesy of Crocalor and Lucario, they still have a tough battle on their hands. Though this time it's also a hilarious one, since they have to play Waka Steelix, which is quite funny. So up to this point, everything was going just as I expected it to. This is just your standard run-of-the-mill Pokemon anime episode where the main characters resolve a situation that involves a wild Pokemon that is for whatever reason on a frenzy. Nothing special or unique about or out of the ordinary with this premise. Not to mention that it usually doesn't bring anything to the table that is of value. Character-wise, maybe, but certainly not narratively. It does feature action though, of course, which is always nice, meaning that this setup is generally entertaining at least. And I'm happy to report that the animation and pacing are much better here than they were in the previous 2 episodes. Whether this is because they had more time since this episode did air after those 2, or because we are back to the usual 1 episode a week instead of the special 2 in a week we got with those other 2, is anyone's guess, but regardless of the reason, I'm just glad we're back to the usual level of quality. But anyways, the point is that this episode was, up to this moment in time, exactly what the title and preview promised. Which is to say, an entertaining but ultimately inconsequential experience that was fun to watch, yes, but nothing else. However, like I alluded to up top, this episode ended up being so much more. Not only so much better than expected, but also more important and meaningful than expected. This can be attributed to 3 things. First, it turns out that it wasn't just one Laquium-afflicted Steelix on a rampage, but 2. Something I did not see coming. This double trouble transforms an already decent and entertaining battle into an amazing and thrilling one, since we go from a well-coordinated raid battle into a chaotic all-out brawl. Liko and friends were very much in control when it was 1 versus many. But once it's 2 versus many, things quickly get out of hand, which is exhilarating to see. All in all, the action in this episode is dynamic, thrilling, and simply cool from start to finish, with standout moments like Kilowattrel using Uproar to force Steelix out of the ground, Lucario using Aura to find Steelix so that Meowscarada can lasso it, aiming to stop it from going back underground, and Hattrem using Confusion to save Kilowattrel and the Crocalor from falling rocks. This last one being especially nice because it both gives Hattrem some much needed time to shine and serves as a callback to the final battle against Rayquaza. I guess Hattrem is just the best at countering rocks. Well, mostly. Better yet, once things spiral out of Liko and Roy's control, Uruto makes a heroic intervention, which leads to an exciting 2-on-2 battle, with Lucario and Sableye both Mega Evolving in order to contend with the duo Iron Snakes, which they managed to do wonderfully, making quick work of them, which is unfortunate due to the fact that we don't get to see Mega Lucario and Mega Sableye in action for longer. But what little we do get to see is at least awesome. Especially seeing them bait the two Steelix into taking each other out via a head-on collision. Though Crocalor is the one who actually lands the final strike, which is another standout moment since he dive bombs them with Flamethrower with help from Kilowattrel, of course. Second, following their defeat, the two Steelix end up turning on each other. Much like with the heroes in episode 89, Laquium blurs the lines between friend and foe. Recalling this while horrified as she sees the Steelix fighting and hurting each other, Liko decides, taking a page from Ash in Mewtwo Strikes Back, to throw herself into the fray, hoping to get the Pokemon to stop battling amongst themselves. Also like Ash, this puts her in danger, though thankfully, unlike him, she has someone that steps in to save her before any harm can come to her. Said someone ends up being none other than Pagogo, who leaves its Pokeball for the first time since episode 89, which is to say for the first time in the years since. This is the second major surprise this episode has to offer. Obviously, we all knew that Pagogo was not going to stay in its Pokeball forever, but I'm sure most, if not all of us, expected that we wouldn't see it for a good while. Several dozen episodes at least. I certainly did. I was convinced that much like when Horizons began, Pagogo would remain dormant, this time in its Pokeball as opposed to in pendant form, and it would only appear briefly during key moments before eventually waking up fully when the time came. I definitely did not expect to see it this soon, and I mega definitely did not expect that it would stick around. I thought, okay, it showed up, but surely only to protect Liko, right? It's going to go back into its Pokeball and we won't see it again for a while. This is just one of the instances of it appears briefly during key moments I mentioned earlier. But nope, Pagogo is back and it's here to stay, which only makes its appearance in this episode all the more surprising. Now, on the one hand, I'm of course glad that Pagogo's absence was cut so short. Not only because obviously I, and I'm sure most if not all of you, love Pagogo for several reasons, such as it's a powerful and special legendary Pokemon with a ton of narrative value and power in this series, and it's a funny, charming, and adorable little Pokemon, etc. But also because its bond with Liko is simply heartwarming. It's impossible not to smile when you see their heartfelt reunion that leaves Liko with a big smile that beautifully represents just how happy she is. She clearly missed Pagogo dearly, so this moment means a lot to her, which makes it mean a lot for the story and characters. At the same time though, I cannot help but wonder what was even the point of having Pagogo disappear for a year and 3 episodes if you're just going to have it reappear so soon. Like, yeah, a year is a long time in-universe, a long time for the characters, but for us it was just 3 episodes, 4 weeks counting the break after episode 89. That's not a very long time. I feel that the shorter the absence, the less meaning it has, because if there was a good reason, a meaningful reason, a powerful reason, a significant reason behind the Pagogo's disappearance, if there was a mystery behind it, something that needed to be solved or resolved, then it would have been gone for much longer. The fact that it's back so quickly means that there was no big important cause or grand conundrum to blame for it vanishing. Instead, it seems that much like I predicted and Dot surmises in this episode, Pagogo was just exhausted after it purified the Laquium in Laqua, and thus it needed to rest. Specifically, it apparently needed a 1-year nap. Though of course, it conveniently showed up just when it was needed, which makes you wonder if its nap coincidentally ended just when Liko needed its help, or if it already had enough sleep prior to this moment, and it just chose to wait to make its return. Again, waiting for the most opportune moment, or rather the most, I guess, cinematic moment. The former would be awfully convenient writing, while the latter would just be a bit cruel, because Liko would have loved to see it as soon as possible. Speaking of, maybe part of the reason why they, the writers, had Pagogo take a vacation is that they needed to give Liko more to be sad about, in order to further justify her apparent reset. But anyways, the point is that I didn't expect to see Pagogo again so soon. Therefore, its return was definitely a surprise, a pleasant one and one that adds value narratively and character-wise to this episode. However, it also brings into question the motive behind its disappearance and whether it had any value or meaning. I'm not really a fan of plot points that feel like they are just there to steer emotions without lasting impact. If Pagogo's disappearance was simply a temporary device to make Liko sad without deeper payoff or consequence, then it was both pointless and hollow. Though given what Pagogo does after saving Liko, assume its Terastal Form and purify the Laquium-afflicted Steelix, I guess that Pagogo had to return so soon for narrative reasons. Going forward, it will be crucial when it comes to dealing with Pokémon afflicted by Laquium. Also, regarding the Steelix returning to normal, I just love how they stare at each other and realize in shock who they were actually battling. They're both like, oh my god, what? Simply hilarious. And speaking of hilarious, the same can be said about seeing Sableye trying to eat Pagogo. Because it eats gems and Pagogo technically is one, or at least looks like one. Quite funny. The third and final surprise is that this episode ends with Hamber speaking to Anya and Cirque regarding Amethio, who, as it turns out, is missing. Something we learned in this episode, since the last time we saw Amethio, which was in episode 89, he was flying away with Anya and Cirque following the fall of Laqua. So clearly, like Liko and the company, they ran into some complications during their escape. And also like them, they lost someone in the process. Amethio ended up missing in action just like Freed. Though as Hamber reveals, according to Spinel, Amethio is gone for good. He perished after betraying Gibeon, who also kicked the bucket. Hamber doesn't believe this report, however, for obvious reasons, and neither does Cervantes, who obviously got dethroned as director of Exceed. I don't know how or why, considering he obviously doesn't trust Spinel anymore. I'm assuming he didn't just step aside, unless he did so deliberately in order to keep tabs on Spinel from the shadows. But anyways, Hamber wants Anya and the Cirque to find Amethio. To achieve this, he gives them a Zygarde cube so that they can find the Zygarde, suggesting that Amethio is with it or that Zygarde can find him, which I don't doubt, considering that it has eyes everywhere. In any case, it's clear that Rayquaza is not the only shiny dragon that will still be relevant going forward. I'm willing to bet that they will both be crucial when it comes to stopping Spinel and the Explorers. I also think it's quite possible that just like Zygarde might find Amethio, it could also find Freed, or maybe Rayquaza will find Freed. You know, so that both sides have a shiny legendary dragon helping them. Specifically the one associated with their side, the one they inherited from their respective ancient adventurer. Also, like I've said before, I strongly believe that Freed is still alive, so it shouldn't be surprising that I think that Amethio is alive as well. Heck, they might have even ended up together and will be found together. Finally, I just want to talk about Uruto and Dot. Like I said in my review of the previous 2 episodes, Uruto didn't make the best first impression, and this episode certainly doesn't help his case. His insistence on finding and following Roy to the point that he's even questioning random people asking if they have seen him makes him feel less like Roy's rival and more like Roy's stalker. Or perhaps it would be more apt to say that he feels like the recurring Pokémon of past series. The ones that would follow Ash and friends around, occasionally showing up to cause trouble, or simply watching from a distance or slightly off-screen instead, with or without doing something that may or may not affect the story of the episode in question. This is reinforced by the fact that he is the one who provokes the first Steelix, which leads into the battle. So like a good recurring nuisance, he makes sure to make his presence known indirectly by kicking the hornet's nest off screen and leaving the main characters to deal with the aftermath. It's no wonder Roy once again chooses to leave him behind, this time dragging Liko along. Speaking of Liko, she allows us to learn that Uruto is shy around girls. Is this something that will be important later? Perhaps. Not that this would lead to anything particularly interesting, nor is learning this about Uruto something worth celebrating, or that I'm happy to learn. I guess I can concede that it is funny to see him hide and turn away from Liko because he is embarrassed. As for Dot, well, while I'm glad that she is still part of the show, I hate that this is only remotely. Which yeah, suits her both in terms of personality and in terms of what her role is. Plus, this is likely also what she prefers, but I'd rather her contributions all be in person for obvious reasons. I'm sure this is something that will likely come in the future. At least I seriously hope so. However, for now, it feels like Dot is being severely neglected. She was demoted from main character to supporting character. She's back to how she was at the beginning of this series, in more ways than one. Not only is her role the same, but it feels that much like Liko, she got a reset. All of her growth was thrown out the window. Her going from shut-in to someone that enjoys being outdoors, exploring and adventuring in person was literally the crux of her development. And now, she's back to where she started, which I don't have to tell you is not good. Again, I can only hope this is temporary, especially because like I said last review, she clearly grew in other ways in the 1-year time skip. So it's a shame we cannot see this in a more active, consistent way. Her development deserves to be shown, not sidelined and certainly not decreased. Reducing her to a background presence undercuts everything she went through. Again, hopefully this is just a brief lull and not a permanent step backwards. So overall, this episode was amazing. What looked like a typical filler turned out to be the most surprising and important episode in this arc thus far. Between the intense double Steelix battle, Pagogo's unexpected return, and the shocking update on Amethio and the Explorers, Episode 92 packed way more narrative weight and value than anyone, myself included, could have predicted. While it also erases any mystery or meaning behind Pagogo's disappearance, highlights, thoughts concerning regression and reinforces that Uruto is a pain in the rear, it is still, without a doubt, a fantastic episode and one that serves as a reminder that sometimes the episodes you overlook end up being the ones that leave the strongest impression. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, feel free to click the links on screen. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me keep making content like this, you can find ways to do so in the description below. Your support truly means the world to me. Thank you so much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.